Hey guys, you are listening to the second episode of Speaking of Europe. My name is Jules.
My name is Ceren.
And we want to apologize upfront. We know the episode was supposed to be online on Monday, and that will be a plan for the upcoming weeks. But Jaren was really sick yesterday, and you had a night shift at your job.
I had to work at night.
It was really not the ideal day to finish our episode.
But now we're here.
So thanks for listening. We are going to talk today about the Greek elections that took place 1 month ago.
In
Greece.
Took place. I must say that took place on July 2019.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm gonna talk about it with Greek historian Giannis Mavrogenis. And we're gonna look at what subjects were the most important in the Greek elections and why were they the most important. Because believe it or not, the economic crisis was not the biggest issue. And to understand that, we have to dive into Greek history.
I would like to thank all of those who voted for me. We will be closing a painful chapter in our history. But my desire is now to take control of our destiny.
But first, we're going to talk about all the other things that have been happening in Europe. Before we start talking about the European news,
I think we should bring up some comments that we got from our listeners.
Our very first listeners. The first is coming from a friend of mine, actually, who lives in the Netherlands, David Fox. He works at the Ministry of Economic Affairs. He had a comment on our talk about the new Prime Minister of Britain.
Last week I was jokingly saying that maybe the reason why Boris Johnson was so supportive of Turkish membership to the EU in the early zeros is because he wants to make one last joke to the EU, get Turkey in, and then pull Brexit.
Exactly.
That was a joke from my side, but apparently there's a truth to it.
Yes, well, maybe there's a truth behind it, because David rightly said so, that England has always been a supporter of further expansion of the European Union, and the more expansion, the better, with the goal that unity in the European Union will be weaker and the European Union will be less centralized. This is not something that only English Brexiteers went for. Many British people in politics envisioned this kind of European Union. The bigger the better, the less powerful the better. And the French were, for the very same reasons, against, or at least skeptical about further expansion of the European Union.
We got a comment on our YouTube video.
One of the comments is actually from a friend of mine. She's from Israel, Tiran Goldstein. And Tiran Goldstein is saying this: I really enjoyed your podcast, especially the updates in the beginning. It sounds like there are a lot of similarities between Italian and Israeli politics. I know you said you wouldn't talk about Israel, but just in case, the adjective is Israeli and the plural is Israelis. Anyways, I'll be tuning in next week. I can't remember that we said that wrong.
I don't remember.
Well, I trust her.
Thank you, Tiran.
Yeah, and I hope you're listening again. And then we also got a comment from a certain Steinberg saying, hello from Estonia, looking forward for being a listener.
That is exciting.
That is exciting. I hope it's not my grandma. Anyways, what is happening in Europe, Jaren?
So this week, Boris Johnson.
Johnson is back.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to be a commoner in our podcast. He was in Scotland last week. First of all, he was booed when he was shaking hands with the Prime Minister of Scotland. And of course, this protest was by the pro-independent, anti-Brexit Scottish people.
Mm-hmm.
And I also came across some news related to that this week on Euronews, that a small majority of the Scottish people would vote in favor of independence if a referendum was held today.
Mm-hmm.
But as you know, a referendum was held in 2014, and I think it was 55% that said no to independence from the UK.
Something like that.
Yeah. But that was the first poll in the last 3 years after the Brexit vote regarding the Scottish independence. And this time around, looks like a very small majority would vote in favor. Not like people didn't see that coming, right? Actually, that was the first thing people were talking about when Brexit was happening. They were like, oh, so what about Scotland?
Yeah.
Because also the news was stating that people are saying they voted overwhelmingly in favor for staying in the EU, not necessarily staying with the United Kingdom.
Exactly, like what was being warned during the independence referendum in Scotland was that if the Scots vote for independence, they will not stay in the European Union. And that was one of the most, well, maybe not one of the most convincing arguments, but it was definitely an argument that was used very often. And that argument turned out to be a very cynical argument, actually, because in the end, England decided for the UK to leave the European Union. Well, England and Wales, actually.
Yeah. The poll also showed that a small majority wants a new referendum. By the way, what is funny is that when we were pitching this idea of doing such a podcast to each other or to our friends, we were all the time saying, yeah, because when you turn on the news on TV or when you go to a website to read about the news,
international English-speaking news.
All you hear about is Brexit.
Exactly.
So we don't want to do that. We said, but it's
it's just
first
hard.
2 episodes and we are talking about Brexit again.
It's just impossible, you know. The second biggest economy of the European Union is about to leave, and it has such an impact on all countries and all national politics in Europe that it's just foolish to not talk about it. But we hope to balance it with a lot of continental news, a lot of Brexit-free news. Some news from our new president. I am, of course, talking on behalf of the EU citizens now. I'm sorry, Jaren.
Why are you looking at me?
It's not your president officially.
In the room.
I am talking, of course, about Ursula von der Leyen, the newly elected president of the European Commission. Let's talk about her for a second, because I feel like she's going to play a pretty dominant position in our podcast. She is on a charm offensive tour throughout the European Union. She's been for the last 2 weeks in different European capital cities, visiting national governments to talk about the new European Commission posts and future plans. The first capital city that she visited wasn't Berlin. It was, can you guess it?
It was Paris.
It was Paris. And why was it Paris?
Because?
Well, I also didn't know, but actually it kind of makes sense why she first visited Paris, because the very reason why she is president of the European Commission right now is because of Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, right? Like, Macron was the one who proposed von der Leyen to the other national leaders in the European Union. It was him, not Angela Merkel. In fact, Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, has a bit of a troubled relationship with von der Leyen. Yes, well, we will definitely talk about that in another episode. I think that's a very long story. Mm-hmm. But it boils down to the fact that, well, Macron proposed her. So yeah, after von der Leyen received the approval from all national leaders, which was pushed by Macron, she was voted in office by a paper-thin majority in the newly elected European Parliament. So she was quite explicit about the reason of visiting Paris as her first city. In her speech, she was like explicitly thanking Macron for all the support that he gave to her. And that being said, after that she went to Berlin to speak with the German government. Now, guess what were the cities she visited after Berlin? Because that, I think, is also very telling.
Budapest.
Almost right. Warsaw and Zagreb. And after that, yes, Budapest. She didn't make the general or the more common Western European tour, which is more common for a newly elected European Commission president.
Is that a statement?
It is a statement, yeah, because without the Central European and Eastern European leaders, she wouldn't be president right now either. I mean, it's now becoming clear why the Central Europeans like von der Leyen so much. After she visited Budapest, she tweeted, "Good talk with Prime Minister Orban about my political guidelines. Agreed on the need for a fresh start and pragmatic solutions on migration." So she immediately expresses her shared skepticism towards immigrants and migration with the Central Europeans. And when she left Budapest, Orban said this: "With a Hungarian hat and Hungarian eye looking at a German lady, I can tell."
That sounds so erotic.
It does, kind of, yeah. "I can tell the Hungarian audience that a serious lady has become the European president. Von der Leyen understands what is happening in Central Europe, understands what we say, and understands what is important for the Hungarians." So, yeah, the man who once ran a Stop Brussels campaign is suddenly very positive about the new EU leadership. We will see how much of this bromance
is going to last. So, next, I have a spicy topic.
A spicy topic from the spicy Netherlands.
Spicy country of...
Yeah, well, you can say a lot about my home country, but one thing...
It's spicy.
It's a spicy culture, but our food is surprisingly unspicy.
Anyway, I didn't actually tell you... I didn't bring this up to you to talk about it before this podcast because I wanted your raw reaction to what's happening. So, the Netherlands joined to the club of burqa banning countries. The ban on wearing face coverings came into force last Thursday. It's actually funny because the way it is worded is funny. It's a ban on wearing things that will cover your face, including helmets and ski masks in public buildings, because you always wear a ski mask to the hospital or when you have to do something in your government,
right?
In your municipality.
But it also includes something else. Something
else that we are all thinking about, and the way it's going to be implemented is actually kind of funny, because obviously, this legislation doesn't sit well with everyone. The police, for example, said it's not going to be a prioritized offense. Right. They are not going to right away go to burqa-wearing women and fine them 150 euros. Yeah. Or the hospitals have been saying that we cannot implement this because this means that these women are not going to come to the hospital to seek for medical help. So an MP from the Christian Democrats, Harry van der Molen, said it is damaging if there is no action against infringements. The law is that if you're wearing a face covering thing that it can be a burqa, this woman should be fined for 150 euros. Because people are saying that we are not going to implement it, it's not going to be a first-hand offense. Some MPs are saying that it's not up to you as an individual to decide whether it's going to be implemented or not. And law is law, and you have to implement it because law is there now. Yeah. Since there are so many discussions around whether the ban is going to be implemented or not, the newspaper AD published an article telling people they will be allowed to carry out a citizen's arrest if they felt bothered by someone wearing a full-face veil in a public space. And this was later confirmed that if you see a woman wearing burqa and the police is not doing anything about it, as a citizen, if you're feeling bothered, you can do something about it, which also means that you can...
just film them and call the police?
So in this case, you're using courage, and it can be used if the police is not doing anything and if the person is running away. And what you can do is you try to stop them from running. You can hold them to the ground.
God. Yeah. Wow. Well.
So,
That's in theory, right? Let's hope that's not gonna happen
Well,
in reality.
let's hope. I mean, I'm not sure actually if this would never happen, because you basically give this right to citizens.
You say that's also morally fine, kind of, right? Like,
Yeah.
wow.
And whatever you have to say about burqas, because if I am to speak honestly about women, Muslim women wearing burqas, of course it's
Yeah.
not something that fits to my ideology, but I admit that it's my ideology. If I see someone in Turkey wearing burqa, I look at them. I just cannot stop myself looking. But
Of course, yeah.
I admit that it's the ideological difference that makes me look. But I would never go ahead and support such a ban.
Of course, you can say, well, this law doesn't just apply on burqas, right? And that's like the counter argument you hear often, that this counts for everyone walking around with a mask, basically. When you mask your face, you're against the law by now, whether that's of a religious nature or not.
Yeah. Right now, you're against the law if you're wearing a mask. But do you think that a man would see you on the tram wearing a mask and try to tackle you, hold you to the ground because you're wearing a mask?
Yeah, probably not. Look, I think we share a very unpopular opinion, honestly, when I look at the debate in the Netherlands right now, because it's very hot right now, as you can imagine. I personally really dislike the burqa. When it happened to me only twice in the Netherlands, that I was in a space with someone in a burqa. Once it was in the bus and I was sitting not far away from a woman in a burqa, and it made me really uncomfortable. Not just because I can't know who it is, but because of basically the idea that is behind a burqa. But hey, that's me. Who am I to say to this woman that she's not allowed to wear it, really? I don't think it is the solution to these kind of things.
According to this Politico article that I was quoting, there
It's
are...
from?
Politico.
All right.
And the estimation of the women that wear burqa in the Netherlands is between 200 and 500.
Yeah.
I
like,
mean,
what problem are you talking about?
What problem are you talking about? What you're creating a problem kind of there.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
creating this irritation among also the Muslims who are not wearing burqa or who don't support women wearing burqa, but it just creates this irritation, this tension that is not needed at all.
Exactly.
What is this ban for?
Yeah, like if you're really concerned with this,
women's lives,
with these women's lives, then start a project, make a special program for these women. But I think the fact that they didn't do that and never thought of it proves that this is not their argument. Their argument is just that it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and that's why we should stop it. Right? And I don't think that is the right argument in any liberal democracy. That's my sincere opinion. You know, but I also think, and I think that is something we often forget, that people have also an incredible need for defining their culture, you know? And a lot of people are relieved that this burqa ban is coming because there is a law that says this is not Dutch.
Yeah, that's not the Netherlands.
That's not the Netherlands.
That's a line drawn.
That's a line drawn, and we don't even need rational arguments for it. We can just say that's not our
us.
culture. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. You know, and well, personally, I think that should never be a good argument. But I think I think we do have to understand the issue from that perspective. Honestly, I very much oppose this law. I think it's, in fact, I think if you want to talk about things that are not Dutch, I honestly think that this law is very un-Dutch.
Ooh, spicy.
Well, it's not liberal, for sure.
Yeah.
I would like to thank all of those who voted for me. We will be closing a painful chapter in our history. But my desire is now to take control of our destiny.
1 month ago, Greeks voted to change the country. The far-left party, Syriza, has been voted out of office. After having governed the country for the past 4 years, having managed to keep Greece's head above the water in a disastrous economic crisis, the party fell 8% short to win the elections on the 7th of July 2019. Greece is now governed by New Democracy, which is not a new party. It's a center-right-wing conservative party that has been in Greek politics ever since the fall of fascism in the 1970s. The new right-wing prime minister of Greece is Kyriakos Mitsotakis. Excuse my pronunciation. The son of another former prime minister. Are the old right-wingers the answer to change in Greece? Many Greeks argue that the economic crisis was not the main reason why the far-left party Syriza lost the last elections. Instead, they arguably lost the elections because of a deal with their northern neighboring country. Syriza agreed with the new name change of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, now known as North Macedonia. In that way, Syriza hoped to solve a long-standing name issue with the Northern Republic. Macedonia, after all, is, according to most Greeks, the name of their treasured region bordering with that country. It shouldn't be given to any country outside of Greece. Although Syriza tried to solve the issue, many Greeks were not happy with the new name change. Calling a country North Macedonia is still undermining the idea that only Greeks live in Macedonia. Anyways, my question is, and I think many Europeans are wondering this, why does the Macedonian issue matter so much to so many Greeks? And why was the Macedonia question a bigger issue in the Greek elections than the economic crisis? I'm talking about this and more with Greek historian and personal friend Giannis Mavrogenis. You are listening to Speaking of Europe. I'm today with Giannis Mavrogenis. Giannis, how are you?
I'm pretty okay, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing fine. You are a history student in the Netherlands, but you were born and grew up in Greece. You have been politically active yourself for quite a while there, also during the crisis times. So I thought you were the right person to talk with on the Greek elections. Greece got its new prime minister, Mitsotakis, Kyriakos Mitsotakis. The election results were quite destructive for the far-left party Syriza that has governed Greece for the last years during the crisis, actually. Syriza only scored 33% of the votes, whereas the conservative right-wing party, New Democracy, won with 40% of the votes. This kind of surprised me because New Democracy, the conservative party, was initially the party that really brought Greece into this economic crisis, right?
So the blame can be attributed to them in a general context, but the crisis really hit during the time of PASOK, which was the historical opponent of New Democracy. They were supposed to be like a center-left party, socialist party of Greece. You can argue that the crisis got exasperated while New Democracy was in power with Samaras.
When were they in power the last time?
That would be 2010 to 12. 12 to 14.
12 to 14, all right. Like actually right when shit hit the fan in Greece.
Really, you can attribute blame to them, and a lot of people did, but there's also a lot of more blame going to the Socialist Party, which if you look at the results now is nowhere to be found. There's a party called Kinal, which is basically a rebranding of that party. But the old name that has lasted for, I think, 40 to 50 years by now, and was one of the two major parties, are Democrats and Republicans, if you would make it in the American context, is no longer a thing in Greece. So they took the brunt of the blame.
Yeah. Well, what surprised me kind of is that New Democracy is being depicted as the big victors in the Greek election, but at the same time they only got 40% of the votes, which in the end is only like 7% difference of Syriza. But at the same time, they now got the absolute majority of the parliament, right? Is that like how does that work in the Greek system?
So we're not completely proportional. The first party gets gets extra seats, and the party with the most percentage also gets all the percentages of parties that don't get in the parliament. It's a way to ensure that we will have strong governments, I suppose. You can argue if it's democratic or not, but you know.
Yeah. And I think like PASOK, the Social Democrat Party, they won by 8%, so they have been punished the most, for sure.
Yeah,
right?
But they're Kinal now, please. They have a new name, right? New party, not the same.
What's the new name again?
Movement for Change.
There was like this one Dutch newspaper, it's the Trouw, it's a more of a left-leaning newspaper. They said that one thing is for sure, Syriza may have lost, but they did become basically the mainstream left-wing party in Greece, the main competitor for New Democracy.
Exactly. So now, with this result, they might have lost, but yeah, the 32% really kind of solidifies them as, if we're going to continue with the two-party system, which Greece has been for about 100 years now, so a transition out of it might be hard. This will be two new guys until something else really dramatic happens.
To me, it seems a bit mysterious how like New Democracy can actually have such a victory in post-crisis Greece. And then, in addition to that, the leader of New Democracy, Mitsotakis, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, is actually the son of another Mitsotakis, who was the prime minister of Greece in the early 90s. So he's so clearly part of the economic elite in Greece and the political elite that has at least some dirt on his hands. Or have they really successfully managed to put all the blame on the Social Democrats and remained more or less clean during the crisis?
Greece has a very different historical context of how it perceives left and right. So New Democracy, for better or for worse, is like the only real right-wing alternative. There have been other smaller parties, Laos, to the far right and to the furthest right there has been, Golden Dawn. But generally, there's a lot of power in New Democracy, because New Democracy is arguably the oldest Greek party. It exists closely since 1920, I suppose, under names. And the fact that you say, people would think he's from a political family, and that would indict his name, that is not necessarily true, because there's a big core that trust those names still in Greece. People my generation, those names don't mean much to them, but consider the prime minister that got us into this, Papandreou. That is also a huge Greek name, of the other side, of course, but there has been Papandreou prime minister before, call him like the nation builder in the 80s. So yeah. Those names still carry weight. So it's not necessarily an indictment for him. I could even argue that for a big part of his base, that's good.
Yeah. The other thing that I read in much of the European media was that the whole Macedonia controversy in Greece had a huge impact on the popularity of Syriza. Is this something that you would confirm?
Yes, that is absolutely true.
And that's so weird to me. Greek people in many ways suffered so much economically in the last years, maybe the most of all the European Union. And in the end, the Macedonia controversy played a much bigger role in their voting behavior, or at least for many Greeks that was the case. So before we start to talk about that, maybe many of the listeners don't exactly know what happened there. So neighboring country Macedonia has traditionally bad relations with Greece because of its name. Since it is named after a region that is for the biggest part within Greece, Greek people think it is unfair that the country calls itself after that region.
So the real issue that Greeks have, some Greeks have at least, let's not make an indictment against the whole country, is that they feel as not only the name is being appropriated, but the history as well, which is something that the Macedonian people have been doing, in the sense that they do call themselves ancestors. No, they look
the children, yeah,
as their ancestors, and they look at Alexander as part of their history and Philip II as part of their history, right?
Right.
Which is up for debate. It's a big academic debate. I'm not really going to put an opinion out on this, because in the end of the day, for me, it doesn't really matter whose ancestors who. Nations and history go back. But for a lot of other people, it does, because they feel that, you know, this is what makes us different than the other Europeans.
Yeah.
And we have a very strong focus on history in Greece at schools. We learn Greek history in all the states of school. You never really do world history.
And then you go to the capital city of the country that called itself Macedonia, Skopje, and you see all these huge statues of Alexander the Great and other generally perceived as Greek heroes. So it seems kind of an attack on the national pride of many Greeks, right?
They feel it's been stolen and changed.
Jaran just said something crucial. We should call the country that was called Macedonia, we should call it the former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia. So under the left-wing government of Greece, the government of Syriza, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia and Greece came to an agreement that Macedonia will from now onwards be called Northern Macedonia by the entire world. And as a result, Greece will give more political recognition to the country. And that is kind of a precondition for Macedonia, or Northern Macedonia, I should actually say, to enter the European Union and NATO at some point. And surprisingly, I've read a lot of interviews with fellow Greek citizens who actually were more angry about this agreement on Northern Macedonia than on any of the austerity policies that hit the Greek people so harshly during the European economic crisis.
Yeah, so this is quite interesting, and its roots are very much on how Greece teaches its history and what the left has been in Greece, because usually when we look at the very general context, the left is always the one that's kind of further away from nationalism. But specifically in Greece, because firstly of our education system that has stayed the same since 1832, I would say, that's when the country was created, 52, let's say, when we started having textbooks, where it really has created a linear story for Greek history and has told it again and again without much change throughout the centuries. So we have been really conditioned as a nation to not revise anything about our history. It's very sacred in Greece.
Right. If I get it right, the education system that exists now in democratic Greece for a big part is rooted in the time when Greece was in fact a fascist regime, right?
No, it's even rooted way further back. It's rooted when Greece was created as a nation, sort of, but became solidified around 1870. We decided that Greece is the ancient times, it's the Byzantine Empire, and it's modern Greece. And there is a line that connects all three of them uninterrupted. Those are the same people that existed there forever.
So in the educational and in the mainstream discourse of Greek people, Greek antiquity and contemporary Greece are basically one and the same entity, which then of course, if that is what most people believe, then a country that mimics Greek antiquity in so many ways becomes a direct existential threat to Greek society, right? As a historian, would you say that to what extent is this a true idea that Greeks are more or less the same as the Greeks from antique times?
I mean, personally, I think it's a joke to understand nations by looking back. I think what we do is usually we nationalize our history. So we have nations that were created during the 18th century with the rise of nationalism. And there are some older ones, a little bit like England and France, but they became solidified as nations of romantic nationalism, nations that stem from something more divine than the kings that rule them, some essential Frenchness or Englishness or Greekness, right? This happened around the 18th century. And they look to themselves, they look at characteristics that those nations possess, and then they nationalize the past. So they look for those characteristics that they look in themselves now towards the past, and they connect. So they say the Byzantines spoke Greek, we speak Greek. We're Orthodox, the Byzantines were Orthodox. Thus, they're both Greek.
Yeah.
The line of continuation.
Yeah.
And I think most nations did that, but it's still a very prevalent. We haven't really revised our historical methodology.
And how come? Why do you have a clear explanation for that? Why the Greeks have not yet really confronted themselves with the challenge of making your idea of national history more realistic, more truthworthy?
I mean, let's not kid ourselves. This is a very hard process, right? The Netherlands, for example, renamed police action to colonial wars, I think, in 2014.
Yeah, so this refers to my own country, to the listeners. The Netherlands, until recently, refused to recognize their invasion in their former colony, Indonesia, as an actual invasion, but as a police act. Even in our school history books, this was the case up until recently. So, good example, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not an easy process, but Greeks are especially hard to do because it's a highly romanticized time, not just by them, right? By this thing we call the West, like ancient times, democracy, philosophy, right? Those are very highly romanticized concepts, and laying claim to them gives you a lot of credibility as a nation and political power up to a point. Like a big reason why Greece became a country was of European romanticism of the ancient Greece. There was a lot of support from outside of Greece because they saw these old ideas, and they thought if only we could reinstate those people, they would be like this again.
Right. So there was of course in that time there was like this romantic idea of this enlightened Europe that had its roots in the Greek antiquity times, and at the same time it was the time when nationalist movements really started to dominate politics. So I assume there was a very dominant idea in Europe and in Greece that if the Germans and the French and the Italians deserve their own nation, then definitely the ancestors of Europe, the Greeks, should get one, right?
And this was an imported idea. This idea didn't grow in Greece, right? This grew to people that either had some Greek ancestry, in the sense that they came from people that lived in Greece but lived in the Ottoman Empire, the Austrian Empire, in France. We had a bunch of people from France, or Russia even. To give you an example, when Greece became an actual nation, right, and we had our first democratic parties, our parties were called the Russian Party, the English Party, and the French Party. There wasn't such a thing as a real Greek identity. It's kind of naive to just assume that the Greek people rose up or something like that. It was very much a fabricated idea of Greece that was imported in the country, into the geographic location. It wasn't yet even a country.
Okay, so we understand the historical context now a bit better, why it might be so sensitive for a Greek to see another country basically mimicking its historical myths, really. But at the same time, it's still hard for me to imagine the fact that the whole North Macedonia happening played a bigger role in these elections than the harsh economic reforms. That is so weird to me.
Yeah, so for example, in my circles where people are not really into the whole nationalism or really even Greek identity as a big thing for them, the people that I know that didn't vote for Syriza, all of them had economic reasons to boot behind this and not the Macedonian thing, right? And again, my thing could be equally as anecdotal, and it could be the circles that I run in. I just don't want to like frame it that just crazy nationalism is the thing that changed everything. There were real issues with economics. Let me put my bias out here for everybody listening, so people don't think I'm completely objective. This was a government I supported, and if I was in Greece and voted this time, I would have voted for them again, right? So let's make it clear. So I might be looking at this a bit more in a rose-tinted way. But moving forward from that, Syriza came down in a time where people were really desperate economically. They had lost support in the old parties, and they came with a very mixed message. Their message coming from the top was pro-European. Oh, yes, it was change from within, more left alternatives in Europe, stuff like that. But individuals within the party ranged a lot in their ideas. Even a Grexit was sort of even teased by some people.
Right.
Right? This was an issue which came ahead later on. But regardless of that, they won. And their first big challenge was, and I think the first big failure was their complete failure to negotiate.
With the European Union?
Yes. Which at this point, I don't want to give too much leeway to the European Union because I can't say that it treated Greece the best. But at this point, there was evidence that, especially by the fact that they wanted to negotiate and they gave so much time to the negotiations. It was like 8-month negotiation, if I remember correctly, or 6, started with February and then July. Yeah, 6. So the European Union knew that the Greek situation was unsustainable and they wanted to negotiate for a trimming of the debt. And now that might be a bit personal, but I really feel this fell into the hands of one man, which was Giannis Mavrogenis, the superstar of the whatever right now.
Varoufakis, he was back then the Minister of Financial Affairs of Greece, came later with a book on how bad the European Union actually treated Greece. And now I would say he's like one of the frontmen in the left-wing pan-European movements, right? Like he wants to really reform the European Union radically from the inside.
But him as a person, as a negotiator for Greece, I never felt that he actually negotiated for my country. I feel that he went there to be a superstar, to be what he is now, to be Yanni, the international man. He went there, like, I remember getting reports in Greek television where it was the first session and he would go to Soible and be, you're wolves with blood on your teeth and like the people are starving. And I'm like, is this actual negotiating or is this just a showmanship?
Yeah.
It was very disappointing and came to nothing, right? So what happened afterwards was the referendum. And this is, I think, the most important moment of this government. Because the referendum, as other referendums have been in Europe, was very unclear in how it was portrayed, I would say. Because when I actually voted for it and I read the options on it, the options were very clear. There was like half a paragraph in each of them. So you knew what you were voting for.
So tell me a bit more about that referendum that Greece had. It was, which year was this?
Yeah, it was 2015, January. It was the end of the negotiations.
Oh, all right.
So when Varoufakis went out, our new finance minister, Tsakalotos, went in, and I think he worked for a month with the European Union, and they produced a package, right? A deal.
Right.
This deal was not that's what the government said, was not what the government had been voted in. That's what they said.
Mm-hmm.
Because they failed to produce real negotiations. So they're like, we're going to leave this to the people and tell us if they want it or not. So the question on the ballot was, do we take this deal or do we not take this deal? That was the question that was in.
Yeah.
The messaging, though, was, will Greece stay in the European Union or not? Or something like, will we ever take German money again or not? It was very confusing. A lot of people that voted no on the deal and said no actually wanted to get out of the union, or at least had this idea in their mind that this deal means no longer negotiating. We're done. We're gonna find our own way. We're gonna do it on our own. We're gonna either change our coin, leave the euro, leave Europe.
Yeah.
Right? So the deal goes no. It's a historic number. It's 60-40. It's really big difference.
Yeah, so there's an overwhelming majority of the Greek people saying, whatever you negotiated, we don't want it, really.
We do not want this, right?
Yeah.
And then the party goes, okay, deal is off. We're going to try to negotiate something else. And this takes 2 months to negotiate something else, which brings us to August, September, beginnings of September. During this time, Greece faces capital controls for the first time, at least in my lifetime, which means there's a certain amount you can send outside the country. You can only pull 200 euros out of your ATM because there's no package of relief. Our debt is skyrocketing. Our GDP is fallen. And income mobility is completely destroyed, right? I was here and I was trying to get money from home, and we had to find like 3 different people to send me money because we couldn't send the whole amount from one account.
Jesus, man. And it's like just as an interruption, I think this is so shocking to hear also from your own personal life that like you guys are part of the same union that I am part of, and we are supposed to be kind of treated in a similar way, right? We have the same kind of political dignity. We're both European citizens, but
yes.
But for some reason you can't. You might even have to change your future plans because you're not allowed to take more than 200 euros. I mean, you know, like it's anyways horrible when this happens to people in the world, but you expect this to happen, not in your very political community, right? In the European Union.
And stories like me or people that couldn't get 200 euros out are at best annoying, at worst maybe destructive. But think of businesses that couldn't import, right, and send huge amounts of money outside
right.
to do their imports, and we're supposed to be in the same commercial union at the same time. So that was catastrophic to the morale of the people and to our GDP for some time. Like if you look at the meters, it took a huge dip at that point. But at the same time, it kept money inside Greece. It was a necessary measure because we couldn't spend money. That was the whole point. We couldn't get money out of the country because we didn't get the relief package. So there's 2 months of this. And at this point, there's a new deal that comes up. And this, even though I supported the government, this is one of the most ruthless political moves you will see happen. The new deal comes up, and instead of them implementing it, they say, we were voted in for a deal. We failed to produce this deal. The Greek people said no, they didn't like it. So now we have this new deal, but we were not voted in for this new one, so we were going to run new elections. Now what this means is that if you vote in Syriza on those new elections in 2015, the new deal comes in and capital controls will start going away immediately. But if you don't vote them in, it's going to be a new government. It's going to take time to form. It's going to take time to renegotiate with Europe. That means the capital controls could go even for like half a year more. And this gives them 4 more years in power because, of course, people voted for them. Why wouldn't you vote for them? It's crazy not to vote for them.
Right.
And then they followed the austerity policy. But I think at this point, we had been having austerity policy since 2009. Austerity eventually became a part of life.
Yeah. So
And
Greeks were ever since 2009 basically forced time after time by the European Union and by most particularly the northern member states of the European Union, like my home country of the Netherlands.
Pensions or public sector.
Yeah, you were forced to cut and cut and cut in the budget wherever you could, just to show to the Northern European governments that you were willing to suffer in order to get the finance from those Northern European governments, right?
Yes, it's sort of a performative punishment, you know?
You know, like the most cynical part of it is really that from a political point of view, it completely made sense. I very often hear the criticism towards the political elites in the Northern European governments for making these inhumane measures to punish Greek people. But at the same time, most of the citizens in Northern Europe also kind of expected this, right?
Yes, of course, right? And it exudes a lot of control. And if we want to go into more deep economics, a bunch of stuff in Greece got privatized by northern companies. Our telephone companies got partially privatized. Our national television was about to close. Actually, it did close, and then it reopened when Syriza came to power. It was supposed to be privatized. There were even talks about our water and our electricity, which you can argue economics. I'm personally very against it, but you can argue economics, but especially in Greece, where it's a very sparsely populated country, we have very big capitals, and then we have islands with few people, and villages with very small populations. It's really important that we have public utilities for them at all times.
Right.
Because the private sector will not reach those people.
I think like it is pretty clear by now how much of an economic disaster the last decade was for most of the Greek people. Then still my question remains, why did that matter in the end less for many Greek people in their voting behavior than something to me rather trivial, which is the name dispute with their neighbors of North Macedonia?
So, there are two things. First of all, I think it eventually became banal. Economics became another issue. It has been going for 10 years now, right? If you consider that it started in 2009 and now it's 19. So people had started to adapt in this reality. That doesn't mean they loved it, but they didn't necessarily feel that a change in party would change that as well. Correct? Because both Syriza, New Democracy, and even PASOK, which now is calling itself Kinal, all implemented austerity measures. So I don't think that a lot of people thought that, I would vote New Democracy because they will take austerity out or they'll do something different.
Right. So it's like basically the whole economic suffering has become like an accepted suffering in Greece. Like most citizens in Greece think this is something we cannot change, we have to go through, and this is something that will not, for that reason, play a role in my voting behavior. Basically, on an economic point of view, Greeks became very cynical about their own democratic sovereignty.
Really? Because we didn't have much, let's not kid ourselves, right? After the negotiation fails, Greece didn't get an option to really implement any of its economic policy, of its own economic policy.
And then, like, the last thing on which you can have a say, at least as a Greek person, is whether those in the north are going to call themselves Northern Macedonia or Skopje. Is that like kind of the idea behind it? Why this is such an important thing?
Right? This matters immediately, and you have some power. And the left and nationalism in Greece are not necessarily separate. Nationalism means things for the left in Greece. It's not completely void.
Right.
Now, it won't affect everybody, right? 32% didn't care, didn't care enough, at least. But there are people that will care. There are people that would vote for like the Communist Party of Greece and would now vote for New Democracy.
New Democracy was very much against Macedonia renaming itself.
Yeah, which is funny, but because most of their leaders are on record saying that the best idea is to just name them North Macedonia, but it was a way to get power at this point. It was a way to dig into Syriza's heels. And,
One last question, Giannis. If you have any feeling that you can answer it sufficiently, is about Mitsotakis himself. What do you expect from him? He's forming the government right now. He's the new prime minister of Greece. Do you think, even though you already said yourself you are a Syriza supporter, are you optimistic about the upcoming 4 years under Mitsotakis? Do you think he has the chance to make Greece a better place?
Okay, so first things first, he has a big advantage on his side. Two big advantages. First, that Greece has stopped being in a default in 2018 and has repaid its packages, I think, which was something that Syriza actually did. Of course, with heavy austerity as the price for it. So he has that going for it, and he has a majority in the parliament, which gives him a lot of power. He can pass most laws now, actually all laws. So he has the political capital in theory to do it, and he has an economy that is starting to go up.
And that's actually all thanks to Syriza, right? So Syriza gave him the context in which he potentially can succeed as a prime minister.
Yes. So, this is also the reason why I would vote for them, because apart from their failings, Syriza was a very successful government in a European level, right? They followed the European guideline, they repaid the debts. Socially, they were very good for what I believe in. They allowed gay marriage finally. Protesting in Greece, which is a huge thing, became way less violent because they demilitarized the police in a high amount.
Yeah.
So the response from the protests was lower as well. You didn't get Athens burning like it used to.
Yeah.
So they were quite successful as a government in those regards. They were unsuccessful in their one big promise. That was the thing, to stop austerity. I think neoliberalism and what he wants to do means powerful political capital.
Mitsotakis, you mean?
Yes, and what he wants to do, neoliberalism, he wants to privatize, he wants to give more power to businesses. That's how he wants to do it. In order for this to work, and in all the cases it has worked, it has a human cost. It also has a political cost, because you have to fight with the unions, you have to fight with the protesters, and you have to make sure that you will stop dissent. Because when other people try to do it, when they try to close the national television service, for example, the building got occupied by protesters for weeks. When the austerity measures happens in Greece, Athens burned. It legitimately burned.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, does he have the political power and will to fight all that, or will he crumble like all the other governments, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he has. I don't think Greeks are ready to go even worse. But on the other hand, maybe if we have accepted our economic reality as is today, maybe we'll be too apathetic to it and go through.
So in short, Mitsotakis might have the leverage to do as he pleases. It might be good for Greek business, but it probably will not be a very good thing for the Greek citizens overall.
Yes, in my personal opinion, that's what it has been shown, right?
Right. Giannis, thanks so much.
And have a great day.
I will, my dude. I will. You too.